The FIA has now admitted it. Lewis Hamilton's penalty in Brazil was a mistake. A damaged front wing, a questionable 5-second penalty, and yet another race ruined this time. It wasn't just the car failing him. How did we go from a champion's masterclass to a humiliating DNF, and what really happened in that contact with Colapinto? With Ferrari slipping behind Red Bull and Mercedes in the Constructors' fight, is Hamilton being let down by the system or something even deeper? It's not often Formula One's governing body walks back a decision. But this time, they had no choice. Days after the Brazilian Grand Prix, the FIA has quietly acknowledged that Lewis Hamilton's 5-second penalty, the one that effectively ended his race, may have been a mistake. A ruling made under pressure, in the heat of battle, that penalized a driver for damage he didn't even cause. And as the dust settles, the spotlight turns not just on the incident, but on everything around it. Hamilton's race at Interlagos was over before it ever had a chance to begin. A clean launch, good positioning through the opening corners, then chaos. In lap 3, Franco Colapinto drifted across under braking. The contact was light, but it ripped the front wing end plate off Hamilton's Ferrari. Suddenly, the 7-time world champion was struggling to steer, losing grip, and falling back through the field. But instead of being treated as a victim of racing misjudgment, the stewards handed him a 5-second time penalty for causing a collision. Absurd. What followed was heartbreaking. Already dealing with the handling imbalance from the wing damage, the extra penalty dropped Hamilton out of any strategic window. The team tried to recover through an early stop, but the car was unresponsive, the tire degradation was brutal, and by lap 20, it became clear there was nothing left to fight for. Ferrari called him in to retire not for reliability, but to avoid wasting engine mileage. It was a tactical DNF, wrapped around a misjudged penalty. But the bigger issue isn't just what happened to Hamilton. It's what it says about Ferrari's broader position and how it may be costing him more than just one race. After Brazil, Ferrari has now fallen behind Mercedes by 34 points, and trails Red Bull by a staggering 62. The battle for second in the Constructors' Championship, once a realistic target, now looks like a fantasy. And for Hamilton, who joined Ferrari in 2025 chasing history, not helplessness, the frustration is building. What stings most is how avoidable this was. The FIA's own review confirmed that Colapinto's car changed direction unexpectedly and that Hamilton had already committed to the line. The penalty was a snap judgment, made without full data, and later shown to lack proper foundation. But in Formula One, even a 5-second mistake can ruin a Sunday. And when you're fighting for something greater than just one race legacy, respect, redemption, those 5 seconds feel like a betrayal. So where does that leave Lewis Hamilton now? Still the most experienced, most decorated, most intelligent driver on the grid, but increasingly stranded in a Ferrari project that promises potential and keeps delivering problems. The FIA's mistake may be acknowledged, but the damage, both to Hamilton's race and Ferrari's campaign, is already done. From the moment the lights went out at Interlagos, Lewis Hamilton was on the front foot. He launched well from P7, hugged the inside into turn 1, and avoided the early midfield chaos that often defines the opening lap in Brazil. Within the first 2 laps, he'd already set himself up for an aggressive undercut strategy, holding position, protecting tire life, and preparing to strike as the stints developed. It was classic Hamilton, patient, precise, positioning himself for the long game. But then came lap 3. Heading into turn 4, Franco Colapinto moved slightly under braking. Hamilton was already committed to the outside line, giving space, not forcing the issue when the Argentinian's rear end drifted outward. The 2 cars made contact. Not heavy, but enough. The right end plate of Hamilton's front wing was sheared off. Grip at turn-in vanished. Suddenly, his Ferrari began to understeer, dragging wide into corners and bleeding time on exit. And then came the shock. Just minutes after the contact, the stewards issued their decision, 5-second time penalty for car 44 Hamilton. The reasoning? Causing a collision. It was a baffling call, one that left even experienced race engineers scratching their heads. Hamilton hadn't moved. He hadn't dived. He hadn't understeered into Colapinto. In fact, on the footage, his hands barely adjusted on the wheel before contact. But still, the penalty was handed down quickly, and without hesitation. Ferrari responded with urgency. They brought him in early to assess the damage and adjust strategy. The team hoped that by switching compounds and clearing traffic, they could salvage a top 8 finish. But the car wasn't cooperating. The damaged front wing disrupted the airflow to the floor, critical in this year's Ferrari package, and that destabilized the rear in high-speed corners. Grip faded lap by lap. Hamilton fought to stay in touch, but the balance had collapsed. It wasn't racing anymore. It was damage control. By lap 20, the team made the call, box, and retire the car. Not because it was undrivable, but because it wasn't worth finishing. Every lap would waste engine mileage. There were no points on the table. And in a title battle where Ferrari desperately needs every advantage to secure second in the Constructors' Championship, running a compromised car to P14 wasn't worth the risk. But to fans and to Hamilton himself, it felt like surrendering to a decision that never should have been made. The FIA would later admit that the penalty was questionable, that Colapinto's car had moved unexpectedly, and that Hamilton had left ample space. But the damage had already been done. A potential top 6 finish was lost. 5 points gone. Momentum halted. And for Hamilton, it was another example of how even a perfect start can unravel not through error, but through circumstances beyond his control. The Ferrari SF25 was never designed to tolerate front-end disruption. Its 2025 aero package is built around precise airflow to the floor, a low-rake philosophy that relies heavily on clean entry through the front wing and bargeboard channel. When Lewis Hamilton lost the right end plate on lap 3, the resulting aerodynamic imbalance didn't just affect corner turn-in. It destabilized the entire aerodynamic platform of the car, especially in the long, loaded curves of Interlagos. Under normal conditions, Hamilton thrives on a neutral car. His driving style, marked by early turn-in and progressive throttle, extracts maximum tire life while preserving balance across a stint. But with the front wing damage, the SF25's understeer increased dramatically. That forced Hamilton to brake earlier, rotate slower, and delay throttle application out of low-speed corners. The cumulative effect? Lap after lap, the rear tires overheated, traction degraded, and his car dropped out of the operating window. Ferrari attempted to compensate with an early stop, switching to a harder compound to stabilize the rear. But the team underestimated how much the airflow disruption would affect tire temperature. The SF25, already borderline in colder conditions, became nearly undrivable in Sector 2. Hamilton, despite managing brake balance and differential settings manually from the cockpit, couldn't extract consistent grip. Every corner exit became a fight, and every lap, the delta widened. The problem wasn't just mechanical. It was systemic. Ferrari's setup for Hamilton had prioritized straight-line speed and rear-end stability, ideal for long DRS zones and protecting tires late in stints. But once the front wing was compromised, the entire balance shifted rearward. With less downforce up front, Hamilton had to overwork the rear axle just to maintain position. That imbalance cooked the tires and neutralized Ferrari's mid-race strategy window. Compare that to Red Bull and Mercedes. Both teams brought updates to Brazil that increased front-end grip and expanded the tire working range. Hamilton's car, by contrast, was trapped in a narrow operating window, and with damage, it fell out of it completely. The car's performance dropped by over 1.2 seconds per lap relative to the leaders. In a field this close, that's not just a handicap, it's a sentence. By the time Ferrari called him in, Hamilton had already lost more than 20 seconds to the leaders. The decision to retire wasn't about pride. It was about preserving power unit life and avoiding further degradation. But from a competitive standpoint, the outcome was a catastrophe. Not because Hamilton lacked pace, but because the car, once damaged, gave him no tools to fight with. After Brazil, the scoreboard is brutal. Ferrari now sits third in the Constructors' Championship, trailing Mercedes by 34 points and Red Bull by 62. What once looked like a tight three-way contest has begun to fracture. Mercedes is executing clean weekends with surgical precision. Red Bull, despite reliability hiccups, is still maximizing their results through Verstappen's consistency and Perez's recent resurgence. Ferrari, on the other hand, is losing ground not because of raw pace, but because of lost opportunities, technical misfires, and now, stewards' errors. For Lewis Hamilton, that's a bitter pill. He came into 2025 with a vision to elevate Ferrari, to write a final chapter in red, and to fight for a record-breaking 8th world title. What he's faced instead is a series of setbacks that he hasn't caused. Strategy errors in Miami. A mechanical failure in Singapore. Now, a stewarding mistake in Brazil that destroyed what could have been a critical points finish. And through it all, Hamilton hasn't cracked. But that pressure, however well managed, doesn't just vanish. This was supposed to be the run-in where Ferrari surged. The calendar looked favorable: technical tracks like Mexico and Brazil that suited the SF25's layout, and long straights where Hamilton's setups excel. But instead of closing the gap, Ferrari has opened the door for their rivals. And in doing so, they've shifted the tone inside the garage. Optimism has turned to urgency. Every race briefing is now about damage limitation. Every podium is a question mark.